To help pay for her university studies, a young girl found herself a few times in the role of caretaker and was entrusted with looking after the house of a neighbour, a respectable and trustworthy doctor, who of course paid her decently for her service rendered. That evening, the doctor asked the young girl to come to the house by 7 p.m. Shortly after arriving at her neighbour's house, the young student received a phone call. A man with a hoarse voice told her that if she did not leave the house immediately, he would end her life. Terrified, the student hung up the phone, then stared at the display with apprehension. Obviously, hidden number. 30 minutes later, the phone rang again. "If you don't get out of the house soon, I will kill you," declared the same man on the line. Terrified, the young girl quickly hung up and called the operator in search of a solution. The operator recommended that she should keep the man on the line for about a minute to be able to trace where the call was coming from, if it happened again. Later, the phone rang again. The same man was on the line. Despite his terror, the young girl managed to keep him in line for almost a minute. He repeated his threats to her over and over, asking her to leave the house immediately, otherwise he would kill her. In an emergency, the operator called back immediately to order the young girl to leave the house as quickly as possible, and for good reason. The call came from the second line of the house, which was located on the second floor. The murderer was therefore in the house with her. Second story. There is a young man who lived in an apartment building. One night, someone knocked on his door and he got up to open it. A woman was in front of him. The lady timidly asked him if she could spend the night at his house because her partner was beating her and she had run away. She reassured him by mentioning that she had called her family and that they would come pick her up the next morning. Compassionate, the young man offered him a blanket and suggested that she should spend the night on the couch in the living room. When he woke up, the blanket is folded and neatly stored on the corner of the sofa, and the young woman seems to have left the place. The young man got ready and went to work. The following evening, there was another knock on his door. It's the same woman again, but this time her face bears marks of violence. She asks him for hospitality again. Unable to refuse, the young man offers her to sleep in the same place as the previous night. In the early morning, the same story. She's no longer there. This situation repeats itself throughout the week. Worried, the young man decided to go to the police station to explain the situation. An agent then showed him a photo in which he recognized the woman. The police then told him that this woman had been beaten to death by her partner in his apartment some time before. Third story. On a beautiful Halloween evening in New Jersey, an elderly man who lived alone with his wife was discovered dead in his kitchen. He had a reputation for not liking children and having a great aversion to them. On the morning of October 31st, seized by a flash of genius and wickedness, the man had carefully inserted razor blades into apples that he planned to distribute to children later that evening. His wife, strongly opposed to the criminal actions of her grumpy husband, decided to interrupt the planned massacre. She prepared his favourite pie, a good apple pie, and invited him to enjoy a generous slice of dessert, just before the children arrived ringing their doorbell. The man, who was swallowing his food voraciously, and as if he had never eaten in his life, asked his wife just before swallowing a mouthful, "But where did you find the apples to make this pie? I took them all this morning." It was while swallowing this mouthful that he realized it's little too late, that he had just cut his throat from the inside with his famous apples. Moral: actions bear consequences, often mirrored. The old man's ill intent backfired, teaching us the timeless truth encapsulated in the adage, "What goes around comes around." We're reminded to be mindful of our actions, as the harms we plot for others can very well become our downfall. The story highlights empathy's value, showing the peril of harbouring malice, especially towards the innocent. In essence, kindness and goodwill towards others safeguard our well-being and foster a just community.